And we're back for another Gab with Abigail. If you aren't back and this is your first time on my channel, hi, welcome to Gabs with Abigail, where we talk about the Bates and Duggars and other D-list fundies. For today's video, I guess we're kind of talking about a D-list fundie. The whole Ballerina farm thing, I don't get it. And I just wanted to have a quick chat about it because, like, I don't get it. We're mad at a Mormon woman for being married to a Mormon man, and together they are acting Mormon.
So you just gonna bring me a birthday gift on my birthday to my birthday party on my birthday with a birthday gift?
Happy birthday,
bitch.
Like, Mormon girl grows up homeschooled and one of 9 children, marries a Mormon boy who grew up in a family also of 8 children. Like, it's, I don't know, guys, it's giving Mormon. I don't understand why she's being called the queen of the trad wives when, like, she's just being Mormon. Like, everyone who read the Sunday Times article is focused on the husband supposedly being the worst, and it's like, yeah, but are you also hearing the part where she said they're, like, just being Mormon? I hate that she's been labeled as the poster child for the tradwife movement. I think the actual tradwife movement is doing something and saying something and behaving in a particular way and putting out content in a certain way for a specific, deliberate social reason and agenda. Like, the majority of the most prominent tradwives did not grow up in the lifestyle that they espouse. Hannah has never said you don't need a degree, just a husband, and yet she represents, you know, and is inviting people to live this ultra-conservative lifestyle, apparently. Tradwives are women who are newly choosing to play out ultra-traditional gender roles. These are women who grew up in church but had working mothers. They are first-time born-again churchgoers, former feminists getting their freaky femininity on, okay? And their voices and opinions, i.e. their content, on the traditional life are loud and brash. They are women who think that they are revolutionary counterculturalists for being submissive stay-at-home mothers. Christianity, particularly fundamentalist Christianity, views everything from the egocentric in the world, but not of it. And while gender equality has always been seen as worldly, every few decades, due to the economy and political climate, Christianity blames women getting out from the authority of men as the source of the entire world's problems. Mormon women have not grown up in the same swinging pendulum of gender rights and roles. And it's for this very reason Hannah from Ballerina Farm says that she does not really identify with the term. It is also the reason why there are all these Mormon women getting online saying, I was a tradwife, past tense. The wives of the tradwife movement have not yet made it to the 15-year marriage mark. What's different from Jessa Duggar of 19 Kids and Counting and Josie Bates of Bringing Up Bates to Hannah of Ballerina Farm? And what I mean by that is all 3 of these women grew up in large conservative families. All 3 of them married young and started having children immediately. All 3 of them perform, for the most part, traditional stereotypical stay-at-home wife roles. All 3 of them have their own significant earning power through the idealized depiction of their lives they share on Beyonce's internet. All of their Christian content is light in comparison to the true meat of their internet content. Yet Ballerina Farm is the one being portrayed as the tradwife queen. And look, I get it. Hannah's story is really interesting. She's really the tradwife's people's princess. A beautiful, formally aspiring ballerina now lives a rugged farmer lifestyle with a large family of small children. She even left the big city for rural life. And then everyone found out that she was also filthy rich. Like, I feel like that's what people's problem with her is. Like, that's when it really started, is when they found out that she was actually, like, really rich. There were those who felt like she was cosplaying rural relatability while actually being super wealthy. This facet simultaneously drew haters and more onlookers because we love to look at how the rich live. And I mean, as soon as I heard that she was like the heiress to the JetBlue fortune, I was like, who is this girl? Then there was the whole doing a beauty pageant 12 days after giving birth. People made that moment so much about themselves. Like, oh my God, she's portraying this unrealistic bounce back. No, she's sharing her life. At the point where she had that baby, she already had 7 other children. She wanted to do the pageant, so she did. And that decision that she made does not need to be examined through the lens of women's empowerment or women's impossible societal standards. Social media has kind of like rotted our brains to thinking that we constantly have to see ourselves represented in others, either in the affirmative, ooh, this is so me, or the negative, I could never. It's like we have no idea how to simply be observatory, that perhaps some things should be silently gawked at because we don't have enough understanding to vocalize an opinion. It bothered me so bad that the Times article was written like the author had no knowledge of the Mormon church, that there wasn't really any mention of the scores of other Mormon women who live just like Hannah. They are not a part of some new age movement. There are several YouTube videos discussing why so many mommy influencers are Mormon and why so many Mormons are involved in MLMs. Like, a Mormon having 8+ children and getting to the bag is not in any way new. The patriarchy that permeates the LDS church is not new, and Ballerina Farm is not doing anything to present it as new. It is and always has been her norm. Quote, "The family. A proclamation to the world is official LDS church doctrine that was published in 1995 by the First Presidency, the all-male Central Leadership Committee in Salt Lake City, Utah. This document reinforces the role of families in the LDS religion as central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of His children. It relays the idea that gender is an essential characteristic that defines identity and purpose. This doctrine outlines that men are to preside over their families, while women are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children, but still act as equal partners. But as Laurel Ulrich, a Harvard University history professor emerita, an active member of the LDS Church, pointed out in an interview with the HPR, there is an inherent tension between simultaneously endorsing equality and embracing men as providers and women as nurturers, contained within the proclamation." The reporter was British, which maybe makes more sense why she was not like familiar with Mormon culture, but like, you're a reporter. Do the research. It was so annoying to hear in the reporter's podcast interview a definition of the tradwife movement as
Hannah Nealman is part of this online phenomenon, and they've come to be called the trad wives. They kind of have chosen this life for themselves where they are fulfilling really stereotypical historical gender norms. So they don't work outside the home, though they are obviously now social media influencers. They tend to have lots of children. They make meals totally from scratch, and they crucially, are very public about it. So these are not women who are choosing this life and then living this life behind closed doors. They're posting about it online. And this content is glowing and gorgeous and looks totally idyllic and tranquil. And you kind of look at it and like, I'm looking out the window into Midtown in New York and it's really stuffy here and busy and dirty. And you look at these pages and you think like, oh God, doesn't that look like heaven? Everything's working, everything's right. That's maybe how it's supposed to be.
Ballerina Farm is Mormon, and I think the choice aspect to her lifestyle is very different than, say, Bernadine Bluntly, Mrs. Midwest, or a 1990s Kelly Jo Bates. That being married is directly tied to getting into heaven for Mormon women was not mentioned at all. And I do think that matters when we are saying that people born and raised in this religion have a choice. The sister that Ballerina Farm did that beauty pageant with, at the time of the first round of the competition, had 8 kids of her own. The teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ as Latter-day Saints believes parents are co-creators with God and that families are central to God's plan. President Boyd K. Packer of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles has taught, "The home is the center core of the LDS Church, and the most sacred relationships in the church are in the family." During the 185th Annual General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, held in April 2015, Elder D. Todd Christopherson of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles taught, God ordained that men and women should marry and give birth to children, thereby creating, in partnership with God, the physical bodies that are key to the test of mortality and essential to eternal glory with Him. I understand that people's problem with her is that while she's not explicitly stating that her lifestyle is one that everyone should live, she is contributing to the attractiveness of the growing conversation about being a stay-at-home mother slash trad wife. The podcast episode of the article, I think, was much more insightful than the article itself, though it still had its moments. It did talk about the rising cost of childcare, the falling U.S. birth rate, and how America is in this particular political climate that feeds into the hunger for content like Ballerina Farm. I don't want to downplay how Hannah's content contributes to the romanticization of stay-at-home, homesteading, conspiracy, crunchy life. But I don't think that the narrative and conversation we're having about her being a trad wife is the correct one. Mormon women are taught to look up to pioneer women as models for feminine strength. Primary manuals are replete with stories about Mormon pioneer women who pushed carts across the plains, many while pregnant or nursing, and some under the age of 18. Some buried husbands and children along the way. These were physically strong, tough women who were also devotedly faithful to the church. Hannah, Ballerina Farm, is more of a piece of aspirational iconography to the women newly deciding to go ultra-traditional, the saint the nuns named the monastery after. One thing that was said in the podcast, but not in the article, was how Ballerina Farm is also somewhere women can go to look at motherhood's joys. Obviously, motherhood is not all good and glamorous, but social media is where people show the best parts of their lives. People share their graduation photos, not the grades for their failed chem class or their rejection letter from the nursing program. Her brand is not about the messy pitfalls of motherhood and stay-at-home wife life. It doesn't give advice. Her brand is trying to get you to buy some pork. like that's it. I don't know, guys. I just feel like people are losing their minds watching a wealthy Mormon woman be Mormon. The vast majority of people are not about to homestead and have 6+ kids for their patriarch by choice. But it certainly matters that people are looking at that with longing. Again, I think the podcast the author did about the article was a better take than the article itself. I want to close by saying Ballerina Farm is allowed to love motherhood. Motherhood can be a place that she thrives and thrives better than others. We really don't know the truth and all that. And I don't think we have a place to put our own feelings onto her shoulders. It's not new that people from big families tend to have their own big families. And I don't know, there's just something that rubs me the wrong way. The way Hannah and Daniel let this reporter into their home just for her to water down Hannah, Ballerina Farm, to just being the helpmeet for Daniel's Rima, for the sake of internet engagement for a news article without any bigger context or criticism for the environment that Hannah was raised and the social climate that made her a star. And what if it all does work out for her? And if it doesn't, why are people foaming at the mouth to say, I told you so? When it comes to cults and high control, like abusive relationships, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying that she's in one. The biggest thing is that you need people outside to support you because you're living constantly in a state that says the outside world is scary and hates you and is evil. And if I was her looking at how the world is reacting, are we a place that's going to meet her with kindness if something were to change, if for some reason it didn't all work out? And I don't know. I just don't understand how we sit with that so comfortably. I feel like, watching, I really hope that we are approaching the peak of the Ballerina Farm zeitgeist because I feel like we're watching in real life, like in real time, the making of like a conservative icon, like, or like saint or whatever, like is the phrase. Martyr, that's what I'm looking for. And I just don't understand like how people don't like how the author of this article could have written this article and not saw that that's what she was doing. That like there's a whole huge important subset of the internet and of the country that the kind of like the way that you're talking about Hannah, that they're going to see themselves in, and like depending on the kind of person that she is, what that will make her feel motivated to like do next in terms of where she'll have support and things like that. Like, wouldn't be surprised if we see her at Turning Point or something like that, or some kind of family conference, you know? She doesn't seem the type, right? Again, I do feel like so much of this is being thrust onto her in a way that she has not asked for. But this is precisely what was my problem with like how this article, this interview was conducted. Because I know that there are so many people who identified with this idea of like, oh, this is, they're attacking your marriage, and you see how there's this agenda to break up families, and there's this agenda to blah 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 blah. But that's it for me. Can't wait to hear your opinions about all of this and how you feel about it. Like, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Just put in Mormon. Like, that's how I feel about this whole situation. Don't get me started on the Nara Smith thing. Don't get me started. Like, America, internet, what is that? I don't understand why we're talking about her as a trad wife. It's really strange. It's really bizarre to me. Like, is she not just doing what that girl with the perpetually left-turned neck was doing for years? Or was doing for, like, way ahead of her? Or was I late to Nara Smith's content and this other girl, it was simultaneous or did it after her? You know what I mean? Like, what are we really talking about, except that this is somebody who's pretty already had a following, and so people found this interesting, and the For You page, the algorithm was algorithming. But she's somehow now a trad wife. I've had enough. Anyways, see you guys for the next video.
Let's go. It's like, you niggas gotta stop acting weird. You niggas gotta stop acting